it seems to me like the Copts really live with one foot on earth and one foot in heaven. I mean, there's really no veil between the natural and the supernatural. And we heard some
Mm.
really incredible stories from both the kids and the widows about miracles that have happened and visions that they've experienced since the martyrs were kidnapped and then killed.
Oh, wow.
And it's just really both inspiring and convicting to hear
Mm.
from them and to hear their stories.
Jesse with Church Leaders. We're here with Mandi. Mandi Hart is the president of More Productions and the producer of the animated short film, The 21, which tells the story of the 21 Coptic Christian prisoners who were executed for their faith by ISIS militants on February 15th, 2015. So, Mandi, I want to first ask you, as we talk about this short film that you had a part in, how did the concept for this film arise?
That's a great question. So, my business partner, Mark Rogers, was in Egypt in early 2019 when they opened the new Coptic cathedral that was built in downtown Egypt. And while he was there, he spent time in what's called Garbage City in Cairo. And it is a neighborhood in Cairo populated almost exclusively by Coptic Christians who are responsible for collecting the garbage in the city and sorting it. And as he spent time in that area, he saw photos of the martyrs all over the place on buildings and in homes. And he was reminded of that event in 2015, reminded of the ISIS video that was released at that time, and began to think about how their story could be more honorably and accurately told. And when he came back from that trip, we began to talk about what would that look like? What form would it take? How long would it be? What would be the focus of the story? And very early on, we landed on animation as the format because, as you know, it's a very brutal story. And traditional documentary is not the best approach for such subject matter, and also
Mm, hmm.
difficult when you have so many characters who have rather obscure backstories. And so we knew that animation would be more palatable, as well as give the opportunity to craft really a work of art that is rooted in the Coptic iconographic tradition. And so that's what we landed on fairly early. And I would say the two kind of milestones that allowed us to really move forward were talking with some members of the Coptic community in the DC area, one of which, Tony Risk, he created kind of the definitive icon of the 21. And with essentially their blessing on the project and the connection that we were able to make with our director, Todd, who had formerly been at Cartoon Saloon and knew how to bring that cultural richness to the aesthetic, with those two pieces in place, we really felt like God was opening the door for us to move forward into production. And here we are.
Wow. And, we talked a little bit even beforehand of how many people were involved with this project. So can you share a little bit of like, this is not like just one or two people. This is a community that put this together. Share a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a great word to use as well, community. So we collaborated with the global Coptic community. So we had a group of Coptic believers in the DC area that were part of our early kind of consulting crew as we were crafting the story and thinking about the aesthetic. We run ideas by them, and we got connected with Archbishop Angelos of London very early on, and he was a critical advisor for us. He looked over drafts of the script and drafts of the film and gave us feedback and made sure that we were remaining consistent as well as authentic for the Coptic voice and for their experience. We also had Coptic iconographers involved in the early stages of production, as well as one key animator who is Coptic. Sarah and Laura Ayub are two classically trained Coptic musicians. They provided our film score. And then we
Mm.
also have our narrator, Shafiq Bostros, who is a Coptic believer as well. So it was wonderful to have all of that involvement. But on our team of more than 70 artists, we had over 24 countries represented, represented multiple faiths and a lot of different generational and socioeconomic backgrounds as well. So it was
mm,
a really rich team that came together. And one of the things that struck me the most was we spent almost 5 years in production for this film. And all the way up to the final weeks, I was still getting emails from artists that found out about the project. Either if they saw something posted online or they knew someone who had been involved, and they reached out and would say, "What can I do? I'd like to contribute." And there were a few people that at the end I had to say, "I don't have anything that I could give you. I can't assign you any work. We're that close to the end." But it was really compelling how many people were compelled by the story and wanted to be a part of bringing it to the screen.
mm, mm. And if I correct me if I'm wrong, because I think I read this and saw this. Did I see that Jonathan Rumi is part of the team that kind of helped out with a little bit of this?
Yes, that is correct. So he is an executive producer of the film, and that has been such a gift to us, particularly as we're now in the stage of distribution. Our primary goals were to remain authentic and faithful to the Coptic experience, as well as this story specifically, and to get the story out to as many people as possible. So having Jonathan involved has been a real gift to us in elevating the profile and the awareness of the film so that it reaches as wide an audience as
Mm,
possible.
definitely, definitely. That's great. Mandy, can you share why is it important to tell the story of these 21 martyrs the way that you did?
That's such a great question. It's a very tender story. And we talked a lot in the course of production about how we kind of saw our relationship to and role with the Coptic community. And one of the analogies that Mark used was that we were essentially providing a canvas on which they would paint their own story. And yes, it
Mm,
is the story about the 21 martyrs, but in reality, the Coptic Church has had martyrs for 2,000 years, and some scholars estimate it's in the millions. And so, this is
yeah.
one specific story that is really representative of 2 millennia of martyrs and of persecuted faith that the Copts have endured. And they've been faithful throughout. And these 21 were such a great representation of their faithfulness. So, I would say it was really important for us that we handled the story in a gentle way, but also in a very truthful way, because it
Mm,
is very brutal what they experienced. And one of the things that Archbishop Angelos has said on multiple occasions that I find really, really striking is he said, "Don't pity us as victims, because we're
mm,
not victims. We're victors. We are triumphant in the cross and in Christ." And it's really been amazing to hear him, as well as other Coptic believers that we've interacted with, really express the same perspective, the same sentiment. And I will say for myself personally, I know I have a lot to learn from their example of faithfulness and
mm,
of community support for one another as they experience persecution for their faith.
mm. Well, that kind of leads me into my next question. What do you feel kind of share about what you took away from creating this film?
Mm. There's such a richness to the Coptic tradition and to their history. And I think some of it is defined by the fact that they've existed for 2,000 years. And I think there's a lot to be gleaned from the longevity of their faith and their history, as well as the embodiment of their faith practice. It's really striking to me how much their daily lives are structured by prayer and worship. We were able to spend a couple of days in Cairo and a couple of days in Minya, in the home province where many of the martyrs came from. We were there at the end of January to share the film with the martyrs' families, as well as with the community in Cairo. And in spending that time with them, I really got a lot of insight into how their lives and the rhythm of their lives is structured by worship and by time
Mm,
in worship together as well as individually. And one of the things that I said to some of our team members when we were there is it seems to me like the cops really live with one foot on earth and one foot in heaven. I mean, there's really no veil between the natural and the supernatural. And we heard some
Mm,
really incredible stories from both the kids and the widows about miracles that have happened and visions that they've experienced since the martyrs were kidnapped and then killed.
oh, wow.
And it's just really both inspiring and convicting to hear
Mm,
from them and to hear their stories.
mm. What do you hope that audiences that watch this film, what do you hope their takeaway will be?
Mm. I think broadly for everyone to ask, what would I be willing to die for? Because that, I
Mm,
think, has been the central question that we have wrestled with as a team internally as we've gone through this, is just seeing the 21 that over the course of 40 some days of captivity, how many opportunities did they have to save their earthly lives? And yet they refused all the way down to the end. And so to ask ourselves, what would we be willing to die for?
mhm.
And that brings up a whole other host of questions reflecting on just daily life and priorities and the way that we conduct ourselves in the world. So I would say probably reflection on those ultimate questions.
It's good. It's good. Last question. Where can people go and watch this film?
Mhm. So it's streaming all of this weekend, which is February 14th through the 16th on our website, the21film.com. It's also on YouTube. And then after this weekend, so starting February 17th, the film will still be available on our website. We'll just require that people sign up to stay in touch with us so that
Yeah.
we know the audience that we're reaching. And we also have a screening kit that is available on the website. So if anyone wants to host a screening in their home or at their church or at a cinema in town, they can access
Mhm.
that screening kit and plan an event. We've got our core film, the animated film, but we also have 3 supplemental short documentaries about the Copts, about iconography, and about religious freedom. And then we have a little behind the scenes making of featurette as part of that screening kit. And then we have some promotional art that will hopefully help people raise awareness if they're going to plan an event.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, and I thank you for talking with us, and also just for what you did in like you say, that very small part of that large community of bringing this such important story and remembrance to, and just the inspiration that we can get behind to know that our God is the one that's in control. He's the one that gives us the strength, and to be able to be inspired by these 21 and the way that you tell this horrific story, let's be honest, but yet beautiful story because they never wavered in their faith and uh and just pointed everything to God. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity.